I'm joined now by Congressman Al Green, a Democrat from Texas. Congressman, it's good to have you with me this morning. So President Biden's COVID relief bill now headed over to your side of the Hill for final approval. And after another dismal jobs report that we saw this morning, I assume you will be approving this plan.
Well, first, if I may just simply thank you for having me on. I greatly appreciate it and compliment you for the outstanding presentation that we received on Cheddar. A number of things happened over in the Senate. Of course, it's important to note that the bill was passed and it's come over to the House. But I trust that we won't overlook the fact that the person who cast the deciding vote was the first female vice president of the United States, who just happens to be a person of color. That level of history is something that I will not allow to escape me, simply because I never thought I'd see it in my lifetime. I will be voting for a package. My hope is that we will continue to press hard to keep the package that we initially started with. But I've always said that I'm open to compromise as long as the other side does not try to equate compromise with capitulation. I don't think we have to capitulate, because once you do that, you're sacrificing principle. But you can find room for compromise. I think the president has outlined an outstanding bill. I do believe it's important that we get the rent paid, because it helped the renters as well as the landlords. I do believe it's important that we get the money to persons who need that $1,400. These are the kinds of things that the president has put a lot of emphasis on, and the kinds of things that I dearly support.
Okay, so Congressman, let's walk through what this $1.9 trillion plan does include. You alluded to some of the elements there. $1,400 checks to Americans who need it most, $400 a week in supplemental unemployment benefits, $20 billion for a national COVID vaccine plan, $50 billion for testing, more money actually going to testing versus the vaccine rollout, and then $350 billion in state and local aid. And we should know, in addition to Kamala Harris making history on so many fronts, including that tiebreaker vote earlier this morning around 5:30 a.m. Eastern Time, they were able to pass this without Republican support. As we go through the details, the line items in this bill, do you agree with all of them that $50 billion should be spent on testing, but just $20 billion for a national COVID vaccine plan?
Well, I think the testing is important. I think that we should continue to push for what we initially had in the bill. But I'm not a person who is adamant to the extent that I will say all or nothing. I believe that there is room for some compromise, but I don't want that compromise to become capitulation. I look forward to seeing the debate and making sure that at least we put forth our effort to get the bill that the president initially pushed forward. And also there's some question about the minimum wage being raised.
Exactly. $15 federal minimum wage, a line item that Joe Biden wanted to include in that initial $1.9 trillion package. We'll wait to see whether or not that does actually get pushed through. What do you think? Do you think that that's going to make its way into the bill?
Well, my hope is that it will. I do understand that the bill can have increases in dollars, but we can't change policies in the bill. You can't develop new policies. And I think arguments can be made, but my belief is that this minimum wage is needed. It is something that will increase a dollar amount, but it still maintains pretty much the statutory law on minimum wages. I'm willing to talk about that. This is my personal opinion. We can discuss anything, but there are some things that we cannot change. I'm willing to discuss it, but I do believe that we need that minimum wage increase.
Congressman, critics of a federal minimum wage would say that the cost of living is certainly different in middle America versus on the coast. It's more expensive simply to live on the coast than it is in some of these middle America states. And then on top of that, critics would say that if you want to up the minimum wage, it's going to lead to fewer job gains. With the jobs report that we saw this morning, just 49,000 jobs added in January, more jobs lost than originally expected in December and fewer jobs added in November than originally expected. How do you basically balance these two? A minimum wage, if it is hiked, that could potentially crimp the economy in terms of jobs that we add.
This is not a new argument, as you know. We hear this same argument each time we raise the minimum wage, and each time it's successfully raised, and the economy is helped as a result of it. The minimum wage is not going to just simply go immediately to 15. It's phased in. The minimum wage is something that can vary from place to place. In some states, by the way, they've raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Others have not. So it's phased in. There is an understanding that it will give people the opportunity to at least have what I'm calling a living wage. We're calling it minimum. I want it to be a living wage. Anybody who works full time should not live below the poverty line. And this is what we are trying to do. Keep people above the poverty level who are working 40 hours a week. That means something in the richest country in the world. I think it's something we can accomplish. And while there are persons who will say that it will cause job losses, the empirical evidence seems to indicate that if it does happen, it's de minimis. Generally speaking, it helps the entire economy. When you raise the boats at the bottom, it seems that all of the boats at the above tend to rise as well. All the tide seems to raise all of the boats, as opposed to just those at the bottom. Is what I'm pointing out.
Congressman, I know it would go a long way for a lot of people, especially as we see some of the lowest earning Americans suffer much more greatly in this economy right now than the highest earning ones. I do want to talk about the hearing that you're going to be part of in the Reddit GameStop saga. Who do you want to hear from, and what do you want to hear about?
Well, I do believe that it's important to have someone from Robinhood, preferably the CEO. I do think that it would be good to have Keith Gill. Mr. Gill was a part of that social media platform and was a cheerleader. I'm really interested in finding out whether or not all of this occurred as a part of the normal ebb and flow of the market, or was there something that was intruded into the marketplace, something that was an outside force, if you will, that did not deal with normal ebb and flows of the market? Were there efforts being made to protect some entity, or was it just simply a question of needing to have proper capitalization?
So, Congressman, I guess my question is, I didn't hear you mention Reddit in that list of people that you want to hear from. And the big unknown for many people, including the day traders who are active in this, is we don't know who's behind many of those anonymous accounts. Are you trying to get to the bottom of that to see who was driving prices? And if so, how are you going to do that?
Well, here's what we'll do. We'll, at some point, have a hearing. And we'll start with witnesses that are available to us at the time. And then we sort of follow the facts. I believe that the facts ought to determine where an investigation goes. I don't have a predetermined conclusion. I believe that facts will drive the place that we should ultimately arrive at. So my hope is that we'll get as many persons as we can initially. And I don't want to just name a list of people that ought to be there. I think that our committee is working on this, and the chairwoman announces most of this type of thing, names of persons who will be in attendance. I mentioned one to you specifically because his name has been very prominent in this process, as has been the names of others as well. So we'll start the investigation at some point, and it will probably be a full committee hearing. And at that full committee hearing, the chairwoman will help us to move through that, and that will give us some sense of what our next move should be.
Congressman, before we let you go, I do want to ask about former President Trump's impeachment trial kicking off next week. Notably, Trump is not going to be testifying in person at this trial. How does that impact the trial and the truth for Americans?
Well, it would be, in my opinion, a good thing to have the president testify, but I never thought for a scintilla of a second that he would. I believe that the president, former president now, has intimated that he would testify on multiple occasions when asked, and then he's always relied on lawyers saying that he shouldn't do it. I don't think there was ever any intentionality to give his testimony at an event wherein he would be seriously cross-examined. So I don't think he will testify, but I think it would be good to have it because we could ask him some of the questions that are important that I think he can answer. But there are other things that are equally as important that will get us to a decision. And much of what we want to know has been shown to us live and in living color. We have the president's statements that he made at the rally. We know that persons have said that they responded because the president encouraged them to do so. And we understand what happened when they responded at the Capitol. There was an insurrection. I think we have very good empirical evidence to present. You can always have more evidence, but at every trial, I'm a lawyer, and I was a trial lawyer. I was also the judge of a small claims court. At every trial, you can always have more evidence. But at some point, you have to say, this is enough, and let's go with what we have. I think there'll be enough evidence.
And we'll see what we have starting next week. That's Congressman Al Green, a Democrat from Texas. Congressman, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.